The intelligence assessment had projected 3, a contained territorial dispute in the outer systems, a show of force sufficient to close the matter, returned before her daughter's first naming ceremony. The intelligence assessment had been wrong in the particular way that intelligence assessments are wrong when the contested party has been underestimated by approximately 4 times. She had left her daughter Leary in the palace's care. Her husband, King Soren, had been managing the home administration. 6 weeks into the campaign, she had received the news about Soren. Not a battle death. She would have known how to carry that. A sudden illness, the kind that moved too fast for the physicians to intercept. He had been 41 years old. He had been in good health. He had been the kind of person who seemed too solidly present to disappear, and then he had disappeared. And the campaign had not permitted her to return for the funeral because the tactical position at week 6 was the narrowest point of the entire operation, and leaving it would have cost lives. She had kept fighting because that was what the situation required, and because Kael'veth did not have a framework for stopping. Back home, Leary had been 4 months old, newly fatherless, and the palace's standard childcare program. 2 Velthara nurses trained in infant care had encountered a problem in month 3 that nobody had anticipated. The infant Princess Leary did not cooperate with the nurses. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. She simply disengaged. The quiet withdrawal of a very young creature that is not finding what it needs from the beings it is with, expressed in the form of reduced feeding, reduced sleep, the specific flatness of effect that infant medicine recognized as a concerning pattern and the palace physicians had flagged with increasing urgency as month 4 approached. The childcare coordinator, a meticulous Velthara administrator named Orith, had tried 4 nurse rotations. He had tried adjusted feeding schedules, different ambient temperature calibrations, varied sensory environments. He had been documenting his 5th round of unsuccessful interventions when Warrant Officer Davin Cray of the Coalition Aid Division had arrived at the palace for a completely unrelated supply coordination meeting and had, passing the nursery on his way to the administrative wing, paused at the sound of the infant's low-grade distress and knocked. He was 29 years old. He had 3 younger siblings. He had spent the better part of his childhood in the specific role of the capable older child who handled the small ones when the adults were occupied. The competence was not trained, it was accumulated, the deeply practical knowledge of someone who has held crying babies at 2 in the morning until they stopped. Who knows without thinking about it what position to use and what sound to make and what particular rhythm of movement settles a very small person who cannot explain what they need. He had spent 4 hours in the nursery that afternoon. At the end of 4 hours, Leary was asleep. The childcare coordinator had watched this with the expression of someone who has been trying to solve a problem for 2 weeks and has just watched someone solve it by picking up a tool he didn't have and using it on the first attempt. The situation had, at that point, acquired a momentum that Orith had not entirely controlled. The supply coordination meeting had extended to the following day. The following day had required someone in the nursery. By the end of the first week, the pattern was established in the way that patterns establish themselves when a system finds what works and holds on to it. Warrant Officer Davin Cray had been at the palace for 2 months when Queen Kael'veth returned. He had been there for Leary's first successful solid feeding, her first consistently full night of sleep, the resumption of the weight gain trajectory the physicians had been concerned about. He had carved her a small wooden figure during a quiet evening shift. Nothing elaborate, just the kind of thing his hands did when he had time and material available, and she had taken to carrying it in both fists with the possessive grip of a creature that has identified something as entirely hers. He had not been expecting to still be there when the Queen returned. He had been expecting to complete his supply coordination work and return to his division, and the situation had simply not reached a natural close point before she arrived. The formal assembly in the throne hall had not been his idea. Orith had convened it because Orith believed in documentation and proper procedure. And the proper procedure for a queen's return included a full court assembly, and the full court assembly included all current palace residents. And Davin was currently a palace resident, which was how he found himself standing in the throne hall in his plain coalition service uniform, feeling profoundly underdressed as Queen Kael'veth walked in from the campaign in her battle armor. He had Leary in his arms because the infant presentation was part of the formal assembly protocol, and Leary had been with him when the assembly was called, and nobody had thought the logistics through with sufficient precision. Kael'Veth had seen many things in 9 months of campaign. She had not been prepared for her daughter, for a 4-month-old daughter who had last been seen in concerning health decline, looking not just healthy but luminous, laughing with the easy joy of a baby who has been well loved, reaching for a human man in a plain uniform with the absolute certainty of someone reaching for where they belong. For the small carved figure in his breast pocket, Leary's tiny green hand knew exactly what she was reaching for. Kael'Veth stood at the head of the throne hall and looked at her daughter's choice. "How long?" she said to the room. The coordinator said 2 months. The physician said the pattern reversal had begun in week 1. The nurses said what they had observed with careful professional neutrality. Kael'Veth walked the length of the throne hall. She stopped in front of Davin, who held her daughter with the practiced ease of someone who has done this 10,000 times in 9 months, and looked at him with eyes that had been carrying 9 months of compressed grief and relief, and the thing she had not let herself stop fighting long enough to feel. She looked at Leary, who had gotten the carved figure and was examining it with the focused satisfaction of a baby reunited with a beloved object. "She was declining," Kael'Veth said. "Before you." "She was homesick," Davin said, simply, the most honest description he had found for what Leary had been. And what an infant could possibly be homesick for was a question he had decided the answer to was presence, not place. "Homesick," she repeated, "for someone who stayed." He met her eyes, the green that Leary had inherited, but older and carrying more. "I stayed." Kael'Veth was quiet for a very long time. The court waited. The advisor held his documentation tablet with the air of a man who has prepared for multiple outcomes. The baby, serenely uninterested in any of this, pulled the carved figure apart and put it back together. "You stayed," the Queen said at last, "through 9 months of this court, this child's difficulty, my absence, and an assignment that ended months ago." She looked at him with the directness of a being who has spent 9 months making decisions in real time and does not perform uncertainty. "Why?" Davin looked at Leary. "She needed someone to stay," he said. That seemed like a complete answer. The court advisor wrote something on his tablet. Kael'Veth reached out and touched her daughter's hair, the first contact in 9 months. And Leary looked up from the carved figure with those enormous green eyes and registered her mother's presence with a specific quality of recognition that very young children produce when someone important arrives. Then she looked at Davin. Then at her mother. Then back at Davin. She held the carved figure out toward her mother with both hands. The offering of the most important thing she owned. Kael'Veth took it. She turned